Jesper, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I can start. My name is Jesper Robinell. I am a creative director at Söderhavet and also founder, and together with Baptiste and a few other, and the type foundry So-Type. We're going to talk a little bit more about typefaces in general and what we do, and a couple of interesting sketches or projects we have done, and also some inspiration about what's happening in the type world. And a little bit about myself. I've been studying in Sydney. I see Andrew Barnum here in the small thumbnail. He was my teacher, so that's fun to see him. Otherwise, I've been working at Söderhavet for around 11 years. And yeah, Baptiste.
Yeah, okay. So, so now you should see this nice lady cooking like we do. So type, as Jesper said, it's a Swedish-based foundry. Oh yeah, I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Baptiste. I'm a French guy, designer, type designer. I'm type director at So-Type and Söderhavet. So I'm French, even though I live in Sweden and work in Sweden. And I work with fonts. I do fonts. So I will talk to you about some project we did with Jesper. And after this presentation of our work, I will do a small presentation on variable typography and what it is, why it's important, and how to use it, and why looking at it. But this will be in a second presentation. Do you want to talk about that, Jesper?
Yeah, but we can start with, have you start sharing the screen?
Yeah, it's not shared. Oh yeah, you have to go to the chat and click the link.
Okay, sorry.
I'm clicking next.
All right. As we said, we started So-Type a couple of years ago because we were really into making typefaces for our own clients. Almost every client we had was interested to have their own typeface. And we had done a lot of different typefaces over the years, and started a lot of different sketches. So we had a lot of like started typefaces that we also did want to have some like for the public. So we finished them up, and then we also started to sell them. So I think we have like 6 different typefaces on SoType.com that we sell for the public. Yeah, this is a little bit, we picked a few of the typefaces we have been working with over the years. This is from Sweden's biggest cinema chain, Filmstaden, to like unions. We did now this one of the biggest pension companies in Sweden. We also did Sweden Sans, like I think it was 7 years ago. And we've also been adding weights to that typeface this year.
And on the right side, you can see the font we sell on SoType.com, which were made not for a client, but just for ourselves. So you have on the left the custom fonts, which are exclusive just for clients, and on the right, retail font, which we made.
And we're going to go into what's the difference about between a retail and custom. But we started with custom because we think it's so fun to do this kind of design DNA of the company, and really focus to put it into a typeface that the company can work with over years. That's that's a really big thing over the last couple of years, and we really think that that's booming right now. So I think almost every client we have in Söderhavet is like branding clients. They want to have their own typeface.
Yeah, this you can see is the website. So if you scroll in the slide, you have actually the live website. It's a website of So-Type where we show all the fonts and all the work we do. It's not completely up to date, so you will see now today a lot of things which are actually not yet on the website. But some projects are already on the custom part. So you can, if you're interested, you can find them later on this page. I don't see if you see a video here. I don't see it. It's supposed to be. Yes, okay, good. So yeah, this is like a small show reel of different projects we worked on. It's just to show the diversity of what we worked on and some application. One of the nice things when you do custom fonts is that you usually don't do the application. Someone is working on it and you have the surprise of what's going to be done. Now, yeah, a small words about where typography and type design are today. I don't know if a lot of you are students or long time working in the industry of graphic design, but even compared to 10 years ago, it has changed a lot, and there is now more font than ever. It's crazy, the number of release every day. It's amazing. And this has to do with the tooling of type design, which has improved a lot in the late years and still is booming, which leads to more and better as well control and support of typography. So the tool we have today, either Adobe tools or web browser or any software to do graphics, are crazy better than it used to be. You can use open type functions, you can do so much. And usually the limit is more to know what you can do with the font than what the tool can do itself. So it's a great thing to dig into when you do a lot of typography. So like I said, easier to both make and use fonts, that's great. And because of the tool, it's easier and cheaper to sell and to buy fonts, which is great for type lovers and for type designers, because you can work faster and make more complex fonts. So when I say cheaper to buy fonts, it's true, but also not true, because actually the level in type design has increased a lot. So today you have the standard which is quite high, so you get a lot of glyphs, you get a lot of functions in every font. So you can really have fun with your fonts. And last but not least, new outstanding font technologies that we will talk a bit later about. And you will see some of these font technologies included in some of the projects we did. One of it is variable font, which is still a new font feature, even though it has 4 years now, but it starts to be really mature. And some older one, like some really new one, no, sorry, like color font and stuff like that, which are still babies because they are not standardized completely, but really interesting. So yeah, the limit is pushed every day. So typography is more exciting than ever, clearly. Now, a small word about custom type and retail type. It can be a bit cryptic. These two have been called many names, retail font and custom font, like bespoke, custom, whatever. Behind it's always the same concept. you have a retail font, which is a limited license for a versatile typeface. So it means you buy a license of a product which is existing already. Like you buy a license to Adobe software, it's exactly the same concept. It can be a license for a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of users. All that depends on the foundry and license. So you need to read that on the website usually. So for example, in our case, so RAS, Erois, Array, all these fonts you can find. It means that these fonts are meant to be used everywhere and for anyone. So they have usually a lot of functionalities, and they have a design which is usually more broad, so not like really hardcore specificities, where custom fonts are really designed for a client. It's just like a regular design project, except you get a font in the end, not a website or brand identity. So it's a product with or without exclusivity, but usually with exclusivity. So it means that the client is the only one allowed, at least for a certain amount of time, to use the font. So they own the property of the design, not the design itself, like it's still the property of the creator, but they own the right to use this design, and they can use on every support they want. So you don't need a license for web, you don't need a license for your server, you have all the rights of usage. So it's much bigger right, but also more expensive, of course, because you need to create it, but it's also made tailored for your needs. So it means that if you need these specific functions, which is not all the time present in a font, you will have it. If you get the idea. So yeah, what to look for in a custom typeface? It's I took 4 points. You could say this is a bit generic, readability. But usually you will say it's for every font, but not necessarily. But for a custom font, it has to, because a custom font is meant to be used on usually corporate places. So usually you have the need to have a really high readability because you can use this font for, I don't know, contracts or websites. So at least one way it has to deal with that function. Functionality, like I said, you have a lot of different type of usage, but you need to address these. So when working on a custom font, we usually do a round table, speaking about all the usage that the team are having of the current fonts they use and what they are frustrated about, what they would like to have. And this is a really important part of the development of the font, designing the functions that the team which will be using the font will need. Recognizability, this is really important for a font made for a brand. And that's a really big difference with retail font. You will have to introduce, in a way, some details that will be recognizable in the context of this brand. So by its usage, the font will be associated to the brand, so it will make it recognizable, but it needs to have something that makes it stand out and link to the world of the brand. If the brand is not built at this moment, and even so it needs to. And exclusivity, yes, that's coming from the license. So yeah, brand of their own retail typeface, a service to the brand, custom typeface. Then, yeah, the biggest argument to have a custom font is that the typography is the primary and last brand carrier. So you might wonder why all these companies are making custom fonts right now, which is kind of crazy compared to some time ago. But that's the reason, especially when you think about how big the span of usage is expanding, like the web, screens, print. You have so many places. And typography is really is a really powerful tool to be visible and to mark a place. For example, when this is a big, like the biggest chain of cinema in Sweden. When you meet this place, so it's a physical place, you will see the logo, and the logo which is built with the font, and you will see the font. That's the first thing you will see. This is, for example, a contract with for another project. So when you meet these people, it's a bank here, to sign the contract, it will be a thing that you will see as far as to the contract. So it's the first thing you will see, but also the last thing you will see. On the contract, you can't really see any graphic. There is no color, there is no image, but still the font makes it recognizable as this brand. Same goes with the website, for example.
And also the digital aspect, that everything today, every page you're in, you're in contact with a typeface. So that's also a really good thing to remember, that even if you're like scrolling down in like one of the 100 pages on a website, then you also see the typeface every time you're there. So it's always there, and it's always around you. So you can also bring some brand in that kind of just reading mode as well.
Yep. But that's why a lot of brands are interested in having a font as well, because then your brand is everywhere, not only where you communicate, also where you get information. So yeah, some words about font licensing. So I went through that already, kind of. So yeah, it can be quite hard to license a font. I don't know how many of you already bought a font on a foundry or through a monotype service or something like that. But it can be a quite difficult thing to do, especially when you're a brand, because you need to specify the number of users, the different place you want to use the font, and it can be complicated. So when you buy a custom font, that's also an argument. It's the simplicity. You buy a package, so it's a one-time fee, and you get this right forever. And you can as well get the exclusivity everywhere in the world, so you know that you're the only one speaking with this voice. Now, yeah, some projects. So this first project is actually the last project we did. So it was not launched yet, so no application to show. But I think it's an interesting project because it's really a different project from all the rest you would see. It's a very limited glyph set. So it was designed for a campaign, which is not so usual, a font just for a campaign, but it happens. And it was requested by an advertising company called McCann Sweden. It's all over the world, I think. And so they didn't need that much letters. It's just to write headers and stuff like that on the website, on social media. So this is not all the glyph set, but it's to give an idea of the fact that it's quite small. And they came with a design, an idea of design that needed to be worked, to be refined. But the idea was to have something close to a lettering alphabet, a bit rough, but still to work the proportion and stuff like that. So they had this idea of having strokes on the top and bouncing effect. So we've built an open type feature, which makes the font smartly add all these features. Oh, yeah, so you see here, I don't see the videos, but you see how you can activate or disable this feature. And it brings all these small moving waves around the letters in a way which is smart, because, for example, here, if you type, you can see that these things appear and disappear depending on the context. And if you want, you have, so this is in Illustrator, but it could be as well in all Adobe software or even non-Adobe software. You can also select a glyph and then change it to the one you want. So, and you have even more possibilities. So it gives you really the possibility to almost do a custom lettering based on the font. So it's really practical in that sense. It's not only a font, it's really a tool to build graphics. So to build that, you need to use OpenType features. So yeah, for example, this is one of the alternates. And you need to build a lot of glyphs, a lot. Of course, you don't do all that by hand, you use programmation coding, but still, it's a lot. And then you build a program inside the font which will design the behavior of when this glyph will be used and when this one will be used. So it's kind of a smart font in a way, where you don't have to deal too much with which glyph or which alternates or which what. It will do it for you. There is any, someone, yeah. Okay. So yeah, this font will be used for heading and stuff like that. So I can't wait looking at what they do with it. But yeah, unfortunately, nothing to show yet. Another project, which is interesting because it's using the same tool, OpenType features, to play with alternates. But this time it's for a more complex project. It's not just one font for a campaign, it's a branding font. So a font used for all the identity for Bank, which is a Scandinavian bank. So yeah, they came up with the beginning of an identity, but it was kind of a blank page. So we started sketching stuff and we proposed them. So quite like a regular design project, and they decided to select the idea of cuts inside the letter, of some letter at least, and the idea of the stroke path. So it's like you draw with a pen and the tool marks the end or some of the glyphs. So we built all these glyphs and all this world with alternates, so with or without this triangular cut. And then we selected some of them. And in the end, we built like these two versions, one with and one without. So the reason for that is that if you have all the cuts all the time, it's really exhausting. You can't really use this font, or it's like too much. So what it does here is that you have, once again, this OpenType code behind that looks into the word and say, oh, there is already a cut here, so I'm not going to use one on the next one or even on the next one. So it looks at the scale of each word to try to avoid to have 2 times the same glyph. For example, in variation, the E is only once. If you look, I mean, you can see this in different glyphs. But yeah, you will never have 2 times a cut, and you will never have 2 times the same glyph in each word. So that's for the display weight, which they use for campaigns and stuff like that, for more communication. And then they needed, of course, more versatile glyphs, font style. So we built all these tools around. So the book weight, which is a bit more expanded and optimized for legibility. The regular italic and bold and heavy, which is the same as display, but without functions. The book weight was designed for small, tiny font sizes, because as a bank, they have really heavy contracts. So they wanted to have a font which can be used in really small sizes. So I don't know if they use it a lot, but they have it. So it's a function.
Yeah, and this kind of project is also interesting because we spend almost the same amount of time just doing this communication typeface, and the book weight, that's for the small text and brochures, because there was so much testing on it, because all contracts, everything was really important that it was readable. So it was maybe more time spending on fixing the book weight to get it really readable for all this. And it is in a bank world, so it's really important.
So in the end, they get a font with a font family with really big and really small and everything in between. So they can use that on contracts or websites, or commercials, everything. Another project, this time more, I would say more regular in the end. The result, it's for SBAB Sons. SBAB, which is a bank, I think it's a public bank somehow of Sweden, and they are on the market of loans, so buying a house, buying.
It's the biggest state-owned bank in Sweden, working almost only with loans for buying apartments and houses.
So the interesting, so this project came from another agency, also DDB, which is the DDB Design Bureau, I think. And they came with an idea, but they didn't have really, like, they didn't know exactly. They wanted a sans serif because they have a lot, the specificity of this bank is that it's an online bank. So you don't have an office, you never have a direct contact with someone. Everything is through internet, an app or the phone. So it's important for them to have a really sleek design presence, digital presence, and they have different services as well. To like a Bully, which is a place where you look for a flat or a house, so a research place, and JMCAcademy, which is a place where you look for someone who will find you to sell your flat. So they had all these services they wanted to brand under the same umbrella. So they needed a font for that, which we did. And to do this font, we went across different inspiration of what type of grotesque, what type of sans serif. And we made a lot of different small adjustments. Playing with X height, playing with the boldness of the regular, things like that. So we worked in a really smooth way in that sense. And we ended up with this, the regular bold display, and a really large glyph set, because they need people to be able to write their names, for example, which can have more sense. So here you can see, for example, the R. And you can see, yeah, it's growing in the weight because it has different weights. And it's also growing in the height because there is actually 2 different X heights in this font family. So it's present on every glyph except on the capital, which are the same across all the font. So, yeah. And you can see as well that the descender, so the things that goes under the baseline, goes up when the X height raise. That's because the high X height, so the X height is the height of the lowercase. So you say X height because it's the height of the X. You could say the A height if you want, but we say X height because it's squarish, so it's easier to see. So you can see here, you have the regular on the left and the display weight on the right. The regular has a lower X height and the display has a higher X height. Usually you want a bigger X height for smaller font size because the font looks bigger even though it's small. But you can also want the X height to be bigger, to have a bigger impact for display. That's what we did here. So you will have more presence of the font. It's like boom in your face, which means it also have a bigger leading, so the font will take more place. That's why the regular has a smaller X height to be more compact and not take all the place all the time. And one other thing you can see, is that there is some alternates, like the E and the D, for example, and the A. So these are also using OpenType. The idea was to bring some sort of heritage from calligraphy. You know, when you have these endings of a letter, which comes from calligraphic gesture, to bring that in this sans serif, really geometrical. X, yeah, it's true. X. Yeah, it's my French accent. You will never change that. So yeah, you have this thing on top, which brings more personality and more feature, like display-ish thing. So you can see the difference between the two here in the final result. So here you can see exactly how much difference you have between the X height of the regular and the X height of the display weight. So it's not that much, but it makes a big difference when it's used. So now some example in different languages. The italic, for example, I didn't speak about that, but it has also some adjustment. Like the A is not the same as Roman 8. It's circular A, which is more as well a calligraphic gesture. One of the functionality we've added in this font, it's quite usual functionality, but it was quite important for them. It's having the different type of number, because as a bank, they do a lot of numbers. So they have that as an OpenType feature as well. So tabular number, linear numbers, stylistic small numbers. That's a last feature we made, which is not so usual. It's smaller numbers to be used when inside the text, because sometimes when the numbers are really big, used with caps or lowercase, more with lowercase, the number can look really big. So they have a smallest number set to make the number look more proportionate, to be in between the cap height, so the height of the capital, and the X height. And the fraction. So the fraction is an OpenType feature. So you type your fraction and then it makes it really nice using the small numbers automatically. So here you can see some examples of web pages from SBAB page, so the bank, to Bully, which is a service where you can find a flat or a house to buy, or Itano Clare to find someone to sell your house. So you can see it's like text heavy, these interfaces. So it was really important to have something really, really good. Now something completely different, Forena variable. This is the union Jesper was talking about at the beginning of the presentation. So this font was not really commissioned, actually. It's part of the brand identity of Söderhavet. So it's completely more a Söderhavet project, bringing in So-Type last minute. And the idea of the concept of the brand identity was to fill in the space, to fit as much boom type as you can. So to do that, we designed and made a really small number of glyphs, but viable. So you can see it's a really small number of glyphs. But you can play with different widths. So you have one weight, not so much glyphs, which means the project is also cheaper to work on. But you have all this span of width. So you can fit inside a flag, inside a block, and then you can play like that. So business cards, anything. And they actually use it a lot. So it's quite nice to see.
Sometimes when you give them this kind of typeface, the client uses it a little bit too much. So we have been telling them to cool down a little bit because it's fun. We see it, we love it, but it's everywhere, and it's like the LinkedIn posts are so type center now. So it's I don't know if it's good or bad. It's probably the more than the more worse. I think it makes a little bit not doing the job and making the communication a little bit hard to understand. So if you use it properly, I think this is really cool way of also working with the typeface for a totally different branch that we haven't been working with typefaces for unions, and that they took the decision to use this kind of type-centered identity. That was really fun as well. But as I said, it's like if you do it right, it can be really good. But if you do it too much, it can be hard to understand and hard to get the communication through.
Yeah. Yeah. At least it is. But yeah, it's nice. Project. So that was an example of viable font project. Almegathons, so this is not released yet either, but we have some pictures because it's a font commissioned by Söderhavet for a client. So Almegathons is a big corporation. I don't know if it's public or not, but they are the one helping businesses.
It's the counterpart for the unions. So they have the businesses in focus and work towards the unions. So it's the other side.
Yeah. Playing the both sides. So for this project, it was really interesting. It evolved a lot. But in the end, so we started with a really grotesque, with big gesture, and it calmed down as the project went to become this really bouncy and friendly font, which was the idea also of the brand identity. Have a more happy and my computer, more happy tone of voice. So it goes really black with a heavy weight, which is meant to be used display, and they use mostly the regular and bold. But this project is more like a regular typeface, so no big gesture of technical open type or anything, but more focused on readability and happiness in the shapes, really round, really at the same time calm. You can see the span, so it's quite large span of weight from the light to the heavy weight. And now some text. So one of the first idea we had in mind was to play with this arrow, which kind of made it through, but not totally. And the font was at some point supposed to be joined by another font, playing more with calligraphical gesture. So it has a lot of calligraphic features, like you can see the A. It's really a grotesque, but on the old style part. So very high contrast, very soft and smooth, with entry, outro, intro, outro on the A, but also on other letters. And it was supposed to be playing with these arrows going around, moving, and this calligraphical font. In the end, the calligraphic font completely vanished. So all the flavor stays inside the font. It's the unique font. It has something really human to it, which was the main purpose. So some applications, but it's not yet live. So these are mockups for now. So almost, so that's the biggest project, the latest biggest project we had. So KPA family. So this is the pension Jesper was talking about, the biggest pension in Sweden. And it's a quite old institution. It's more than 100 years old, I think.
It's 100 years old. And everyone working in the like healthcare, teachers and government employees getting their pension from this company. So it's quite widely used and everyone knows about it.
So this font was more, they started, when we started the project, they had quite nothing, to be honest. They used a really old font, not that great, and they didn't have much of, they had really powerful signs and historical moves. So we had to keep some things, of course, like using a serif was a no-brainer in this context because they had this historical thing and this really human and kind and soft history, and what they do is really about climate change and stuff like that. But yeah, so what style and how to do that. So we came in with KPA family, which is a bit similar to SBAB, playing with one display, very strong to be used in headings and commercials and stuff like that. So very tight, like you can see, and with a really high descender. So it means that you can tight a lot to the line height to make compact header and have something that looks really sharp and really strong. And higher X height as well. And all the rest of the weight more calm and more traditional. So you can see some flavor of Art Nouveau, Art Deco, something in some terminations, like the A or the Y. This spikes coming really, almost not grandiose, but yeah, strong movements, which are really inspired by the things from the beginning of 20th century. And the italic is really, really calligraphic. So it's a true italic, unlike the SBAB italic, which for most part was more slanted, so more, slanted italic, so not completely redesigned. The italic is completely a new font. It's not the same design. Of course, it works in combination, so it's designed to feel like the same font, but it's completely different. as you can see here. And it gives this really traditional and but still modern, because you have a lot of angular curves breaking this smooth effect all the time. So here you can see what I was speaking about. That the descender is much slower, much lower on the display rate. Yeah, so that's the big difference between the two. So you can see that in the italic, it plays the calligraphic thing to the max. So you have the stroke is going really internally in the stem, so in the vertical part, it's going really far. You get really this movement feeling compared to the stability of the regular. So yeah, English, italic. The K is really, really swooshy. So in the end, it gives a really readable typeface, which is really important because this is the only typeface that we use on every support. So web, print, everything. With a really wide, quite wide Latin div set. And same as for the bank, a pension uses a lot of numbers. So they have the tabular things. They have also the old style numbers, which I hope they will use, because I don't know if most of you familiar with old style numbers. This is old style, even tabular numbers, which is like next step. But old style numbers is a style of number which is implemented in a lot of fonts that you should use when you use numbers inside the text, because it doesn't break the flow of the X height. Instead of having this cap feeling of massive numbers breaking in, it's a bit the equivalent of the smaller numbers of the SBAB font, but this time it's really going all the way to the traditional font. And some numbers are hanging down and some numbers are going up to the assembler. So it gives the flow more natural vibe, which is really nice, I think. Here's some applications with the identity applied. So you can see how the black weight is popping. And this is a live website which is being finished. Film style and songs. That's. Do you want to speak about this one, Jesper?
Yes. Film style, and as we said, you can go to the next one. This one is, as we said, the biggest cinema chain, and we have been working with them for I think it's 7 years. And we started with the called SF Bio before, and they changed name to Filmstaden. And that was also a big change because we need to change everything, like the signs of all. I think it was like a couple of hundreds cinemas, and every sign going to be changed. And so it was really important that we had this kind of typeface that could handle all this implementation in all, not just the signs, all interior in the cinemas. So we have been working on this typeface a lot, and it's divided in a couple of different weights. We have the functional weights that just regular bold and so on, but we also have this kind of interesting communication weight that we have built in layers, and it's the display weight. And you can sort of do whatever you want with it. It's 5 different layers of the display weight that you can combine in different ways, and you can also change color. When we launched it, it's only used in the red film starting colors, but we can also add for the sub brands, like using different blues or greens or whatever for that kind of sub brand color. So it's getting them a lot of possibilities, and also it solved a lot of their sub brand structure problems. And that was also crazy that you can do it with Typeface, that only with this easy design you can really go in and solve problematic structures that they had. So that was also fun, that we did design that solved the problem with that we saw really fun and visible type project.
But actually,
so
this is true. Oh, sorry. I want to say I didn't speak about that, but this is true of actually a lot of the type projects we spoke about before, like Almega as well. The font was a really good tool to solve all the sub brands, and because they had such large umbrella of sub brands, sub brands, collaboration, and stuff like that, and having a font and working with the font helped a lot to make everything more square. Like, you know, that this is Almega speaking because they use a font, even though it's not written Almega, it's just a brand. So it's a really powerful thing that we see happening regularly.
Yeah, so this is Film Start and Sons. I think do we have any more of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is how you see the function of it. This is the display weight in just regular black and white, and then you add this kind of layer system on it. And it's built in the whole the logotype and all display when you do the advertising, but also in numbers. And numbers was a really important thing about Filmstaden, because when we grew up in Sweden, we always go to we have this in mind, the countdown of when the film is starting. And that was also a really important thing to bring in there. So we spend a lot of time to do this countdown with the numbers in this display weight. So that was also really big, an important branding move, that we kept it, but in the new way.
I think it was in the intro, but it's not.
Yeah, exactly. You saw it in the intro. But also, when you do a typeface, it's not also about. It's also about doing this kind of design system. We can do whatever type, really nice type design features, but it's also really important that we handle the typeface in a correct way. So one of the biggest things we did for Filmstaden was also this, that we did a really good design system, a layout system, grid system, that they can use this typeface in a good way and not be scattered. We have seen a lot of different like in-house departments and in-house design studios. They can do this really good, but if you don't have that kind of really good this in-house and design studio in-house, then it's going to be a problem if they don't have this kind of guidelines and design system. So we put a lot of effort to do this for them, so they can be looking the same all over the 200 cinemas of Sweden.
Yep. Last project of this presentation, and then we will move to the final presentation about technology of the future of font. Soil biology. So this is a bit special because it's interesting to finish with this one, because it's a font which is a retail font at the beginning, so Soray, which was turned
the same typeface you've seen in the presentation is our house typeface that we use for both Söderhavet and So-Type in all presentation and websites.
Yeah, so that's a font anyone could buy, basically on our website. But we made a custom version of it where all the letters sync down and create a baseline at the level of the X height. So the concept is that Soil Biology is a company selling soil to grow plants and anything. The concept is the magic happens under the surface. So the surface appears with the font, with the letters sticking down. So it's using, the identity is using Mono and Mono, which is a version of Mono with kerning. So that's for labels and packaging and stuff. And Sorry, but not in its, on this version with the thinking down letters. So here you can see some applications. But this is interesting because you can see that the differentiation between the two retail fonts and custom fonts I talked about in the beginning can actually also be not so rough. It's not binary either. You can have something in between and create a semi-custom font, semi-bespoke, whatever. Yeah. So that's it for this one. I'm going to send you another link to another presentation. Wait a second.
And feel free to go into the So-Type website. You can test the typeface directly in there. And also a really nice collaboration we have with friends all over the world, photographer friends that have been putting their images into the So-Type website. So you can change all the backgrounds and test the typeface on the photos. So it's quite fun. So just go in and test. And if you want to test the typeface and want to have a download, just contact us. We can give you some test fonts.
Yes. So I sent a new link in the chat. I don't know if everyone got it. I hope so. You should get viable first as a slide. Yes, cool. So this one is not about the work we do at Söderhavet or at So-Type, but more about viable typography. What is it? Why does it exist? And what to do with it? I guess a lot of you, if you are interested in typography, heard about it, maybe played a bit with viable fonts or use viable fonts. That's more rare, but it can happen. But first, going back to why viable fonts. So if you look at how we use typography today, you will see that we see it mostly on screens, which is a big difference compared to a few decades ago, and screens of every sizes. So it can be a massive billboard at 300 meters from you, or a smartwatch, or a screen in the subway at a few centimeters of your face. Yeah, a lot of different sizes and a lot of different content. So heading, text, stuff like that. The reason, the fact that we have all these sizes makes that we don't have the same relation to the text, and the space from our eyes to the screen makes the way we read and the way we perceive letters differently. Because if the screen is a physical object, our eyes are also physical objects, and it's sad to say, but it's true. we are limited. And the resolution of the screen, which is either Retina screen or a really poor resolution screen, makes the font display in a way, but it will be perceived even in another way, depending on the distance we have to the screen. So we need to adapt the drawing of the letter shapes to, one, the resolution of the screen. That's called inting. It's a really old thing now. It's solved. But two, to the distance of our eyes or the font size to our eyes. And this was not solved. In the past, before typography, the text was written with a tool. So either you were writing really big or really small, but the tool was the things that made the letter shape. And the letter shape was always adapted to the size you were writing because the tool was adapting it for you. And your eyes as well. With digital typography, everything becomes scalable. We draw with vectors, which are data points in a space which has no scale, meaning that a letter will have the same drawing any size you use it. And if you want the font to be the same size with a space which is different, you will have to adapt the drawing. Here you can see how the font size is adapted, but you would also on top of that need to adapt the letter shapes. Back in the days, a long time ago, 100 years ago, not that long actually, we used metal type. And with metal type, we didn't have this problem because if you want to print something really small, you have to use a really small metal type font, really small font. And therefore you need to make it. It's physical, so you need to make it. So if you need to make it, you need to draw it. And if you draw it, I don't know who's sharing his screen, but we can see your Gmail. And if you need to make it, then you make it for adapted to the optical size. That's what you got at the time. So here is a picture where you can see the same font across different font sizes, and everything has been scaled to be the same. And you can see that the 4-point size looks really fat and really wide compared to the 72 point size. But if you looked at it like actual size of the font, it will look the same to you. Because of the nature of digital fonts, which are vectors, we could not do that. So we lost this heritage somehow. Some really nerdy font designer kept doing this font with different font size, but it was quite complex. You needed to use this special weight. So you had to write in the font weight 12 point or 25 point. And it's mostly something that was done for newspaper or things like that. You can find some fonts like that, but it's not super usual and it's quite advanced in the usage of the font. But today, we live in the web world, in the world of screens and digital. And there is no reason for things to be static because in a computer, everything is moving all the time. So why should typography be different? And for a long while, so until 4 years ago, typography was the last thing that was static. So you had all these units, which are the web units: percentage, viewport, height, width, relative width, EM, REM, all this stuff, which were relative to the size of the screen, to the size of the font. But on the other way, we kept using these old values, old units for font, pk, type point, pixel, centimeters, which didn't make any sense anymore for web and digital usage. And And this has been the fact for a long time, but for many years, people have been trying to break this, to make font variable and make font move, adapt to the context. So you can see a small timeline here. And it started like a long time ago, in the 90s mostly, but even a bit before, actually, in the 70s, it started already. And it took all that time for the technology to mature and all the big corporation, Adobe, Google, now Microsoft, to be ready to launch this thing and to make it open to the public. There used to be a format by Apple and by Adobe, multiple master and TrueType GX, but they never made it really. So what is the variable font now? So today still we use static fonts, but we can use variable font. But a static font is one font file. So a font is a file with the description of the drawing of each glyph. So the glyph is one shape, a vector shape, and that's it. You can't make it change. The hinting will make the rasterization different depending on the resolution, but all in all, the vector shape will stay the same. In a variable font, you will not have this. You will have a dynamic design space. What it means is that here you have 4, it could be much more than that. You will have a design space, so a space in which you will define some sources. For example, a regular weight, a bold or heavy weight to start with, so two different. And in between, if you make these shapes compatible and you work them to be working and not making weird stuff, so you know how to draw for variable font interpolation and stuff like that, then you will have a seamless in between shapes world where you can select any of them. And this continuum, you can make animation, you can select which weight you want exactly to fit, like because you print on a certain type of paper and you want this to bleed less, or this kind of small thing. But also if you want to have interaction on a browser, you want to hover and the font to smoothly grow, these kind of things. I don't know what this video is. Yeah, I think it's a design space. So I think it's a design space with 2 or 3 the dimension, and now with 4, yeah, of the opposite. I don't see the videos, but yeah. So you can have as much dimension as you want. It's easier to represent 2 or 3 dimensions. When it starts to be 4 dimensions, and it's like, you know, hyperspace. No one knows how to show that. But you can have weight, italicity, or slantness. You can have width, height, and combine all of that and find different space and instances in all this design space. So it somehow it can become almost like a meta font, even though it's not a meta font. Meta font is something else. But it's like you have a font and you have all this world of exploration inside this font, where you can find different parameters. Parametrical font, you could say, but it's something else as well. Yeah, it's a variable font. So the result of that is that you have one file where you used to have a lot of files. So when you install the font family, you're like, oh yeah, I need to install the bold, regular, it's really boring. And then someone says, oh, there is a new version of this font. Oh, I need to reinstall all of them one by one, and you don't know which one was a good one. It's a nightmare. With a variable font, you have one font. So it's much easier to track the history of it. But that's not really the best argument. The best argument for at least web usage is that all these fonts individually will have a bigger space on the disk than a variable font. Because what you describe is actually one design and then the relation of the different weight to this design. So you will say, for example, this point is on the X0 and Y0, and I say you should go in that direction, then in that direction. So it's much smaller. You can compress a lot of data inside the font. So for example, here you have 150K per font, which is quite usual. It can be bigger even. And if you compress all these 8 fonts into one, you can, it depends on the design, of course, but you can expect something like 250K font, which means that you will do only one request to the server you are going to, and you will get not 8 fonts, but an infinite amount of variation of this font. So you don't have to pick to decide if you want to have the bold and the regular, or the book and the regular. You can have all of them and decide what's the best for the context. You don't have to compromise because of the bandwidth of your website, basically. And it's also less costly for like big companies. Like if you're Google or Netflix and you have like thousands and thousands of requests, you will not have as much people downloading the font because it's only one file. So faster website. So yeah, here you have a visualization of Almega S set. So you can see that all these in-between states are inside this private space, design space, and you can select them. Another example, playing with the identities, the smugness, so you can bounce back and forth. You can do funny stuff like that. Another example, exploring variation with interaction. So that's a really old example. I did for a pitch for Svenska Spel, which is like the Lotto of Sweden. So you can do animated logo if you wish. You can interact with the weight. You can do animation like rolling of like across the letters, and all that is purely CSS because it's inside the font. And the best thing about it is that it's text, so it's scrollable by Google. It's scrollable by text readers for accessibility for people which are blind. So you don't have to compromise and think like, I want this animation on the text to be visible, but I want this text to be readable by the machine. You have both of the, yeah, you can have everything. Here is another example where it's filling the screen with the font. So a text input where you type and the font will shrink to fill in the space of the screen. So you can imagine more things like design-wise. This could be a search bar. It's really crazy, but why not? You could have that also for, you know, I don't know, news. I don't have the news yet. News fitting the screen. I have another video I didn't put in this presentation. Fitting the screen in width, so like tightening, you know, always full bleed. You don't know what the news will be, what the title would be, but it will always fit. And a last example is this one. So here you have a text and my face. And actually what's happening is that I'm moving back and forth from the screen. From your perspective, looking at the screen, the text is getting smaller and bigger. I don't know if you can perceive it, but the letter shapes is changing a bit, so it's getting a bit bolder and I think tighter. It adapts to the font size. And from my perspective, when I was looking at the screen, the font was always looking exactly the same. So this is a computer, so it's a bit weird, but you could imagine this being a billboard or a phone, and your distance to the device would not matter because you will always see the same size of text. You could walk towards the screen and see the text the same size, and the letter shapes would be also adapted so that you perceive the font to be all the time the same, even though it's not. So this is something that's doable with variable font, which was partly but not completely possible before. Yeah. So yeah, there is a lot of potential in the use of variable fonts. These are really experimental use. But you can also have, for example, simply a website playing with the optical size. So depending on the font size you will use and on the context of its display. So for example, tighter in width on a phone screen, less contrast if it's used smaller, these kind of things. And all that automatically. That's it. I don't know if there is someone to take over. But,
thank you, Baptiste. Yeah. That was really insightful. I think we'll just open it up for a few questions if anyone has any questions. If you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
That was a lot of information you went through. It was great.
It's always hard to see what kind of level you're gonna land on, because everyone has so much different knowledge about the typefaces. So hopefully you get a little bit of both the inspiration part and the more tech parts.
Yeah,
if something was not clear, sorry. Yeah, if something was not clear and I was too fast, or you want more information, that could be a question.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to either turn on your mics and ask, or just send it in the chat. I
can see a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. What type design program do you use? Glyphs app. It's a really good software, especially I would say it's really good if you don't care that much about technicalities, because it's really taking you with it's like a really UI friendly program, and it's really extendable. So if you're a tech nerd and you want to program things, extend the software, you can go there as well. So it's really a complete program. I will recommend it, but the only down is that it's Mac only. So if you're working on Windows, you won't be able to use it. It's FontLab only.
And there's a question about italics. Why are italic A sometimes different from regular A?
Yes, so that's part, I mean, you have the choice of making an italic double deck A. That will be slanted Roman. And there is nothing wrong with that. But it has some historical reason. It's because the italic shape comes from writing, cursive, writing. So Roman classical calligraphy. And when you do an italic, you don't only slant, you also redesign all the letter to be more in that spirit. It's an historical thing, so it's a reference. So that's why, of course, it depends on what you want for the typeface. In the context of KPA, we wanted something which has modernity into it, but also a lot of historical background, feels really humanistic and all that. So that's why we did that.
So
training.
Yep.
Yeah, training. I didn't do personally type design school, but I hang out with a lot of these guys, and I learned as I did. So it depends. I don't know the Australian type design world, so I can't say much about that. In Europe, there is a lot of good type design school, and in the world, there is a big type design community. I think if you're interested in type design, you should go on Twitter and follow some people. There are a lot of people doing good stuff, and a lot of people share a lot of knowledge to learn type design. Then there are some.
I think Clean Type is from New Zealand, isn't it?
Yeah,
He's
Clean Type.
Quite big in the type world. Lots of good stuff coming from there, and it's a little bit closer to you guys.
Yeah, but
I think the Twitter community is good. It's lots of good type designers there, and also like feel free to ask. You can send us email about like if you want to have any advices on schools, or we can look around. Maybe you have some tips.
Yeah, I would say don't hesitate to mail people you like the work. That's true for anything. But the type design world is a small world, so I would say go for it. People are really friendly, and we would, for example, definitely answer you and give you advice on books or stuff like that. Totally.
That's
yeah,
great
GliffSap
advice.
is GliffSap.com. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that's great advice. Steven's asking if that he's noticed a trend of big bold texts across posters and websites. What principles influence new type trends? Is it a reaction against the monotony of sans serif across?
I think one big thing that's happening a couple of years is that when we started with Filmstad and Sans, it was we chose another typeface for the brand, and there was circular. And if you know the type world, circular is quite common. It's really nice typeface, but it's used by lots of agencies or brands like Spotify, Airbnb. I think they used it before. So it's lots of brands using it, and that was also something that we wanted to work a little bit against, to do their own typeface that has more of their own design DNA, so you don't get so average and similar to everyone else, because I think that's a really important thing in the future, that you have your own design identity and not just have the trendy typeface or a common typeface, because that's or we think it's quite boring, and we don't think it's useful. We think it's better to have something that's a little bit different and differentiate instead of being the same as everyone else.
I think you probably touched on this, but Claire is asking if variable type is already widely used.
Yeah, it is not, but it is. It is, and it is not. It's hard to say, but on the web, it's not. I think it's really weird how technology takes time to implement. It's the weird thing is that it's compatible across all browser and all Adobe software except After Effects, but all the other one. So you can use them. I don't know how much people use them for desktop use. I don't know how much people use them for web, but I know it's not much. Some people, some big companies started to use it, but it's slow to go there, because to implement this kind of technology, you don't need to only educate the designers, you also need to educate the developers to implement the font properly, and then you need to also, there is all a chain of things to educate. So that's why it's important to speak about it, because it's there, it's great, but then you also need to explain why it's good, because it's like, oh, variable font, it's nice, but why? And actually there is a lot of great way to use it to make better typography, but you need to explain it as well. So it's not widely used. So be the first.
Okay. Alicia is asking, if I said her name right, what are some tips you can give to someone who's trying to create their own type, to design their own type?
The best tip, I think, would be that typography is not a beautiful. It's not a beautiful collection. It's a collection of beautifuls. That's not me saying it. It's a quote, but it means that you don't draw glyphs one by one. You draw a relation between shapes. So don't try to make the most beautiful A ever, or Z or whatever. Try to build all the glyphs at the same time. And to really reuse component and shapes in all the other letters. So the more, be lazy, I would say.
And also find the design feature quite fast that you want to build it around, so you don't so you have like a core element in the typeface, like a cut or this kind of round and straight contrast or whatever, just to have something to build the shapes of, so you don't do different shapes on every letter. Then it's quite strange. So have a good idea of what you want to have for small feature in the design.
Great.
Yeah, and do only one idea. It's hard, but
okay. And Andrea is asking, what other trends in the type industry have you noticed or are you excited about?
Trends, it's hard to be super excited about trends if you speak about visual trends, because it's really exhausting. Right now, the big trend is on the A top. It's really nice, but it's going to be exhausting after some point. We had the, yeah, you know, trends, it's coming and going. So, but I would say what is exciting, it's the tools to build fonts, actually, to use them. And also there is more and more openness toward other scripts, because we do Latin fonts, but there is more than Latin fonts. There is Arabic fonts, there is Devanagari fonts, there is, I mean, so many scripts, I mean, not fonts. And this is really going wild. People all over the world coming from different backgrounds are doing more and more things. So this is really exciting, even though I will probably not use them.
Do you think, yeah. Right, yeah. Well, I was just wondering, do you think that it's becoming more common to have more, because like the most common is Latin typography? Yeah,
but it's you can see that it's coming, it's being wider and wider. I think it has to do with internet, globalization, screens. You need the tools, so you need to digitize them, and people will not stop writing their language in the script. They have to write them, which is great. So people are going for it. And if you know how to write Arabic, go for it. Do Arabic font. It's great.
That's great. It's a bit ironic. A few years ago, when all of this was just new, it was just everyone who had a language other than Latin-based languages had to kind of adapt, because all the technology only accepted, you know, Latin-based letters. But now it's kind of different, so that's great. Kara's, someone was asking about books. Yeah, are there any books you would recommend to people that want to learn type design?
It's picking up the books.
Oh, great.
I went to my library. This one is good. Theory of Type Design by Gerhard Unger. I think it's the most, it's good because if you want to start, you don't want to be overwhelmed. It's too much information at the same time. And this book is not too hard. It's quite easy to read. It's well done. And it goes into every details you want to know, but not too far. So you have different chapters, so you don't need to go in every detail of everything at once. You can focus on one thing when needed. It's really well done. and it goes through, it gives you a good example of historical types and modern things. It's not like outdated at all. It's a quite new book, I think it's 2 years ago. So
Right.
Theory of Type Design by Gerhard Unger, really good.
Okay,
Purple.
great.
I will write it down.
I just typed Theory of Type Design, but feel free to type the author's name.
Yes.
So other than books, in terms of social media accounts from around the world, do you have any good typography social media accounts to follow?
You should follow the Instagram of Type. Type is doing something really cool right now. Is using Instagram to educate about typography, like an introduction Instagram account. Going through every letter one by one and explaining like this and that is good. This is an optical thing that you should care about, because type design is a lot about optical illusion. That's why optical size is so important. It's also another optical illusion. And you need to experience them to be able to fix them. And you don't necessarily understand that it's an illusion if you don't know it is one. So yeah, I will recommend him if I had to say one.
Thank you. All right, I think one last question. When you do the initial drawings of a font, do you sketch on top of an existing typeface as reference, or do you use a blank grid instead?
No, but no, I never use an existing typeface. But it's important to have canon in mind. I don't know if it's really English. But, you know, you have this world of references in mind, historical shapes or not so historical maybe sometimes, which is not like you should not copy them and you should not draw looking at them, because that would be bad and also not so interesting for your client or even for yourself. But even though it's letters, so you always have a reference, but I never draw on top of
For someone starting out, would you think it's a useful thing, or should they just kind of just start from blank?
I think it's interesting to experiment if you want to see how making this change will have an effect on the text. Mm-hmm. For example, what happens if I do a longer descender or ascender? What happens if I do bigger X height? What happens if I squish the font? Yeah. That's really interesting. But I don't think you should do that to create a font. It's more an educational tool, I think.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, well, there is one more question, if you guys don't mind. When do you sell custom fonts into your retail section of the business? Do you wait 10 years or more?
Can you, how do you mean by that?
I'm not sure. That's what the question says. So you guys sell custom fonts?
Yeah, the custom typefaces are sold for our own clients as a branding agency at Söderhavet, and then we sell them as a part of the brand identity, and then we have a fee of each weight, or a good, like a price, different kind of prices depending on how many weights. But also then we do custom typefaces against or for another agency for their client, and it's the same. We're just working for the scope of the type family, so how many weights and so on. And the retail fonts is the other part of the So-Type that we sell for, that we have done, and we own the licenses, but we can sell a license for using on each project you want to do.
So it's more of your the fonts you've created yourselves without any clients, and you can sell them.
Yeah, exactly. And the custom typefaces are also, they have a license, we can't sell them.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, but there is something which is important, and it depends on the client. So every custom font license depends on the client. It's the exclusivity right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do a custom font for a client, and if the client doesn't want to pay the exclusivity right, then the client doesn't have the exclusivity. So it means that you can reuse that design for something else. But usually the client doesn't have any reason to not pay that. So it happens rarely.
And we've been looking into different kind of year limits as well. That if you can give it, you can get it cheaper if you just buy the rights for 5 years or so on. So if you want to have it forever, like Sweden Songs, that they bought the government bought the license forever, because that would be crazy to have a like a short license. So we can't do anything. We don't own anything about it more than the like artist rights for it. But they have the license to use it forever.
Okay, great. A lot of people have been asking if we are able to share the recording after the event. If you are both okay with it, we can share it to all the attendees in a link in an email.
Yeah, so we'll not have the beginning.
Sorry?
They will miss. Sorry. Go. Oh yeah, okay. But they will not have the beginning of the presentation because I didn't screen record my screen.
Okay.
So I can give the link.
I think it was recording through Zoom.
Okay.
I think it has been recording the whole time, so we can send you the video.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Baptiste and Jesper, for this amazing presentation. And so, yeah, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And feel free to give us a shout or email if you have other questions.
Yes. And have a good evening. We will have a good day.
Yes, have a good day.
Really warm days. It's really hot in Sweden right now. We have summer and over 30 degrees in the air.
Wow, that's amazing. We've been it's been really cold here. The opposite as usual in Australia. All right. Well, you guys have a good day then. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.